This podcast was brought to you by the most vile and despicable company that ever walked the earth. I am, of course, referring to Ernest Anderson Shovels.
Hello and welcome to Monkey Broadcast, a monthly review and discussion show with me, the Jonin Monkey.
And me, Sven the Crusader. You know, everyone, you really don't know how much you miss podcasting until you have bronchitis and are taken out of work, schoolwork, voice acting, generally anything strenuous for a week.
Yeah, I am really glad that you're back, because I don't think I could do another podcast on my own.
Well, I mean, the solo part you had to do last month, sorry about that by the way, was pretty good.
Well, I'm glad you think so. Anyway, here we are in the month of May, and spring is descending upon us, although looking at my window and the heavy clouds and rain, it really doesn't feel like it right now.
Yeah, given the fact that it was below freezing this morning here where I live. Yeah, me either.
Well, I guess we mustn't grumble about the weather and instead get on with the show, and we'll start with our first section, which is
QandA!
This is the section where we answer questions sent to us by the audience. If you'd like us to answer your questions, either leave them in the comments or send them to me via Twitter with the hashtag MBQuestion.
Our first question comes from Train the Dragon. I see you, Train Man.
Besides manga, what are some of your favorite books or series of books? What are they about, and would you recommend them?
Oh, Train. You're about to get the longest lecture on Stephen King and Terry Pratchett.
I guess I will start, since I have a feeling my list is going to be shorter. Sadly, I don't read as much as I should do, probably, but I have started reading a couple of fantasy novels. Like, I've started reading the Dragonlance Chronicles. I haven't finished it yet. In fact, the only book I have finished in that series is Darkheart, which goes into the backstory of one character, which was pretty good, although I have a feeling the significance of the character decisions have been completely lost on me. And another fantasy series I've been following is the Night series by Robert E. Keller, which is, in terms of the general lore and characterization, it's kind of basic, but he has a great way of writing suspense. Like, the characters are not the most complex in the world, but you like him enough that when they get into a dark and tense situation, and believe me, they get into a lot of dark and tense situations in this series.
As you tend to do in literature.
Yeah, but it is kind of strangely enthralling, so yeah. Those are the main fantasy series I'm following. Otherwise, I've been taking on a strange task this past year, which is I've been reading through the original Arabian Nights, as in the original translation from the 1940s that goes on for about 12 volumes.
Yeah, so you've told me. How's that going, by the way?
I'm on volume 4.
Oh, you're gonna be there a while.
Yeah, from a cultural perspective, it's really intriguing, because I will admit I don't know much about Middle Eastern culture, so it's a nice window on that world, and plus, given the nature of old legends, some of it is genuinely awesome, some of it is just unintentionally hilarious, frankly.
Well, I mean, at least it's not like Greek mythology, which ranges from awesome to really funny to absolutely blood-curdlingly fucked up.
I mean, admittedly, there are moments like that in the Arabian Nights, but thankfully not as many as I thought there would be, so...
Oh, thank ye gods that there's no equivalent to Zeus's swan dick.
Well, there is a moment that really does feel like it could be out of Game of Thrones, but probably best not to dwell on that.
Oh.
Yeah, the long and short of it is, hey, also, we have this kick-ass female knight who is making everyone look like a joke whenever they go up against her. I'm sure the king will be respectable and not drunk or drink and then try to take advantage of, oh god.
Oh, hi, Berserk. Or possibly George R.R. Martin. Did he time travel by any chance? Okay, moving on.
Actually, the one last thing I will say before I hand over to Sven is, one other book I can definitely recommend, bizarrely, is actually by George R.R. Martin. It's a collection of novellas put into one book, Night of the Seven Kingdoms, which is a very, very distant prequel to Game of Thrones, and, well, surprisingly really, really engaging. In fact, I actually prefer it over the actual series, to be honest.
Yeah, I've actually read it myself, and it's amazing how George R.R. Martin doesn't actually suck whenever he has a cast he can't physically kill off. Obviously, he can't murder the star, who has to go on to become an old man and die heroically in the fire at Summerhall, and of course he can't kill the future King Aegon, can he?
Indeed, and I think that's what's entertaining, is that you still have that level of realism and incredible tension, because, well, someone's going to die painfully, you'll receive psychological damage, but the fact that, like you said, Dunk can't die means he can't just kill people off for shock deaths. He has to actually think of, how does Dunk get out of this one?
Yeah, and it does smack slightly of good old comic book, how will our heroes get out of this one? But it's actually very believably done. I didn't think George R.R. Martin had it in him, but sure enough, he pulls that off with the same level of character development that actually drew me into his writing in the first place before Season 6 happened.
Yeah, definitely. And I will also say, in a world of Game of Thrones, Dunk is such a refreshing protagonist, just because he's noble, pure good heart, wants to protect and help people, which is already a rarity in Game of Thrones, but the fact that, unlike, say, Tyrion, he's not someone who has to be incredibly intelligent and knows how to walk the moral grey line, it is basically just a dumb guy who wants to do the good thing. It's strangely refreshing.
Yeah, I mean, he's legitimately one of those Ned Stark Brienne types. I mean, neither of them are, of course, exactly what you'd call slow, but Dunk is, shall we say, a simple man, in roughly the equivalent of one of the characters in our D&D campaign. He's good and noble-hearted, but his way of doing good basically amounts to smashing things. And it actually works.
Indeed, yes.
It's funny what good you can do whenever you're approximately 2 feet taller than the rest of Westeros.
Indeed, yes. So, yeah, those are all the book series I read. Sven, over to you.
Okay, here we go. From the top. Top 3 authors and all the books by them that I recommend. Okay, Terry Pratchett, Monstrous Regiment, a story that I've reviewed about badass women attempting to earn their place in the military of a hilariously screwed up equivalent of the most ungodly combination of a Soviet bloc country in 2003 America. The Going Postal series about a hapless thief attempting to earn his redemption in the eyes of the main series' despotic leader while fighting off all sorts of quirky masterminds. The Guard series. What do I say about the Guard series, beyond the fact that Sam Vimes got to be the single most likable police officer in the history of fiction, simply because his idea of policing amounts to follow the law, do good, and snark about it afterwards. Really, that's just scratching the surface of the Discworld series. That's just the books I've read. Okay, Stephen King. The Mr. Mercedes trilogy, a crime thriller series centering around the efforts of a retired detective bringing down at first an uniquely f***ed up mass murderer, followed by a series of various criminals. The Shawshank Redemption, which really, at this point with how legendary the film is, really begs no explanation. The Green Mile, which, again, at this point, most people know. Let's see. Oh, 11/22/63, a historical fiction time travel series about an English teacher who goes back through a time portal in a restaurant closet. I did not stutter. To save the life of John F. Kennedy. Hijinks ensue. I'm sure I'm missing out plenty of other titles, the likes of which include Carrie, The Shining, all those legendary names, but I'm gonna use this opportunity to plug the short story Drunken Fireworks, Stephen King's sort of lighthearted dark comedy about 2 families of drunks who get into a yearly war over their fireworks displays. Seriously, that story needs more love. Last but not least, Victor Hugo, Les Miserables. Seriously, basically just look at our November episode.
Well, I don't think I can say anything to add to that, so yeah, those are our book lists.
Yeah, go check those out, I need a drink now.
Our next question comes from Roy Havenstone, and he asks,
What are your thoughts on Atlus's policy on streaming Persona 5 story?
I should probably explain for people who aren't aware of what's going on. One of the biggest releases at the time of recording has been Persona 5, the latest in the Persona series, which a lot of fans have been excited for. However, at the same time of its release, Atlus released a notice regarding the game. Simply put it was basically telling video streamers and video creators that they don't want the experience spoiled for people within the opening weeks of launch. So they gave some general guidelines to reviews and podcasters. They basically said, please do not post any specific plot points or story spoilers and talk about the game in broad strokes, which, okay, fair enough, I guess. But it then goes on to give very specific guidelines to Let's Players and streamers. In particular, please limit video content to the in-game date of the 7th of July. Because for those who don't know the Persona series, you had to decide what activity you're doing each day, and it runs on a in-game calendar. And then goes on to say that each video must be at most 90 minutes long, no major story spoilers, do not focus on cutscenes and work purely on getting through the dungeon or straight gameplay footage and have commentary. The statement then ends with, and I'm directly quoting for the sake of fairness,
This being a Japanese title with a single playthrough story means our masters in Japan are very wary about it. Sharing is currently blocked through the native PlayStation 4 user interface. However, if you do plan on streaming, video guidelines above apply above except length. If you decide to stream past the 7th of July, I highly recommend not doing this, you have been warned. You do so at the risk of being issued a content ID claim or worse, a channel strike / account suspension.
Really, Atlus? You didn't learn from the lesson of all the bands who tried and failed to have their songs taken off of YouTube? You somehow do not realize that people are going to do it anyway, and eventually it's going to get to the point where there will be nothing you can do about it?
yeah, I will admit my first reaction was, how the hell are you going to enforce this?
Yeah, I mean, are you just literally gonna hunt down everyone who streams the game?
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting issue. I mean, it's an issue that actually gets slightly more complicated the more you think about it, and to be honest, I could potentially go off on one. So Sven, is there anything else you want to add before I just vent, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, let me just add this. How far does this policy reach? Are you going to take TV tropes to suit because someone put spoilers under the characters section? This copyright spoiler thing is ridiculous, especially whenever you're issuing account strikes and quite likely destroying someone's potential AdSense livelihood. This is silly.
Yeah, it does seem like a strange move because apart from the fact that you cannot enforce it, it does seem to be generating a lot of ill will, and admittedly, Atlus has been forced to release a second statement extending the cutoff point to the in-game date of the 19th of November, basically just before the final act, and they apologise if their initial blog post came off as threatening. They just said they wanted to be transparent about what they did, and they also said it's just a really special case. And the thing I find interesting is reading that statement again.
This being a Japanese title with a single playthrough story means our masters in Japan are very wary about it.
The reason I find this issue is that already we see that there is a culture divide here. Because, okay, as Sven kind of alluded to, there are aggressive copyright holders in the West, mainly in the music business, I seem to notice.
Yeah, and I seem to recall a huge issue with Viacom being gigantic doucheboxes a few years back.
Yeah, they were kind of the precursor to Wall Street Journal.
Oh, dear sweet Jesus, don't remind me of the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah, that's a whole other kettle of fish.
Something ranting about moral guardian rags like the Wall Street Journal and the Daily Goddamn Mail. Moving on.
Yeah, but it's something I've noticed that in regards to copyright issues and takedown, there seems to be a cultural divide because Japan seems to be... Japanese businesses in particular seem to be especially aggressive. Like, just taking my experience as a personal example, out of all the things I've received copyright strikes for, it's mainly been for Western music, and all the rest are from Japanese companies. Like, every time I use a clip from a trailer released by Nintendo to the public, I'm issued with a copyright strike. And every time I use a cutscene from Metal Gear Solid 2, specifically the opening cutscene, I'm hit with a copyright strike. Any anime clip, copyright strike. In fact, part of the reason we went to a purely audio podcast and abandoning the visuals was, well, partially because it took a lot less time to edit, but also because we were inundated with copyright strikes for using images from manga. You kind of see where I'm going with this. Whereas a lot of Western companies seem to kind of realize, okay, there's not much we can do about it now, and if we're lucky, it might cause people to buy more of our product. But Japan kind of sees, no, we see it as theft, you will fall in line and stop using our content. And there have actually been a lot of recent movements that give examples of this. Nintendo trying to set up a contract where it says, oh yeah, you can make ad revenues of our product provided you only talk about specific games. We get a large cut of your ad revenue and we have to approve every single video before you upload it.
Wow. Are we talking the review industry here, or prison visitation rights?
Yeah, and the example which I actually think shows this difference considerably, there has been a re-release of Dragon Ball Z known as Dragon Ball Z Kai, which, for those who don't know, it's basically an HD remaster of the series, with the filler taken out so it matches the original pace of the manga, an updated score, and in the case of the English dub, a re-recorded dub that's closer to the Japanese script and takes advantage of the fact that, well, the likes of Sean Chamel, Chris Sabat, and all the rest of the cast now have decades more experience, meaning they can probably make the characters sound a lot better.
Yeah, that's sort of how one would expect voice acting to progress.
Indeed. So, recently they were re-releasing the Boo Saga, and there's a brief scene in that where, before the next martial arts tournament, a short movie was played celebrating the events of the previous arc, but it was using caricatures of the DBZ characters, and so it's basically this movie playing out while the main cast either cringes in embarrassment or is utterly enraged at their depiction. And Funimation decided, okay, you know what? Since it's going to be a short scene, and it's basically caricatures that the cast don't like anyway, let's bring in Team 4-Star. In other words, the creators of Dragon Ball Z Abridged, a parody series that is incredibly popular on YouTube. So, several actors from that series voiced the caricatures and threw in some extra references, and it was intended to be a nice Easter egg for the fans and a nod to the online community. Just as they were streaming this, Toei stepped in and ordered Funimation to remove the scene, and it has not shown up in any of the DVD releases or of the streaming afterwards. Because as far as Toei is concerned, the Abridged series is not something they want celebrated or acknowledged at all.
Oh my god. And I thought George R.R. Martin was bad about copyright.
Yeah, it's this sort of thing where there's this strange cultural divide, and with that in mind, a lot of the knee-jerk reaction is basically saying that Atlus has been incredibly evil, but part of me wants to say that at least Atlus has been open and upfront about we're actively trying to stop spoilers. This is why we're going to be issuing copyright strikes. We know you're excited, but we're being told by our Japanese masters to not do this. And on top of that, I think it's all just part of this very interesting situation going on YouTube right now, where clearly a conversation needs to be had, because at the moment we're all kind of dancing in this grey area. Because on the one hand, as much as it pains me to say this, they do have a right to do it. at the end of the day, it's their product. So if they don't want people telling them all what happens at the end of the story before they even purchase it, then yeah, I can kind of understand that. Admittedly, I will argue that one of the initial guidelines on Something Awful forums, where arguably modern Let's Playing came from, was that you don't Let's Play a game that's only 2 months old for the exact same reason. You don't want to spoil the game for someone who's eagerly awaiting it. But at the same time, there is stuff like fairness of use, which does cover transformative work, which Let's Plays are, since a lot of the time you're going to them for either additional information about the game, just to see that Let's Players' opinions of the game, or just for the sake of comedy, if nothing else.
Yeah. I mean, I get that artists and companies have rights, but honestly, the content they most often take issue with, by law, really isn't violating anything at all.
Yeah, it's that kind of strange thing. I mean, the thing is, the more I think about it, the more I feel like I could talk on for hours, because we're all in this massive grey area at the moment, because no one really wants to sit down and actually think, okay, what rules should we set for? Should we just make it an official law on YouTube that you don't talk about a new game 2 months before launch? Do we initiate something to protect fair use? Is it really going to affect people? Because I've had anecdotal evidence both for and against. I have had people who came up to me for a Jungle Climber Let's Play and said, oh, thank you. After watching it, I picked up the game and played it for myself, and yeah, it was a lot of fun. And I've also had people coming up to me and saying, yeah, thank you. To be honest, I didn't really want to play the game, but thanks to you, I now feel I know a lot about it. So, yeah, it's one of those things where it's not an easy argument. There are arguments both for and against it, and I feel eventually we're going to have to settle this once and for all. I know no one wants to talk about it, because Let's Players and streamers, let's face it, it's their livelihoods on the line, and companies don't want to challenge it because, well, as far as they're concerned, the current business model makes them money, and they don't want to run the risk of making less money.
Yeah, and admittedly I'm biased, because in these debates I almost always side against corporations. Trust me, we have some bad ones in America. But honestly, it seems to me like a big part of the issue here is the fact that nobody seems to want to acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, the other side has a point.
Yeah, it's something we're going to have to think about. I mean, bringing it back to the earlier point, Atlus is completely right for doing this, and again, I applaud them for being open and honest about it, but at the same time, it definitely has damaged Atlus's name. Like, people are now wary of saying pretty much anything about Persona 5.
Honestly, the scope of this is just a little prohibitive, because at this point, I don't blame people for being wary of really even mentioning the game in any context, because if Western media companies are anything to go by, they may very well take very liberal interpretations of the guidelines they've set up.
Yeah, that's the other problem. That's more or less my opinion on this matter. The fact is, it's kind of a small symptom of a much larger problem that, like it or not, we're all gonna have to sit down and address at some point.
Yep, sadly so, and I know this is really funny coming from me and given some of the very strongly worded opinions I've expressed recently, but we may eventually have to realize that there might actually be a middle ground here.
Indeed, yes. Well, that was a heavy question. Let's move on.
Our next question comes from Vice of Legends.
So many cartoon reboots are happening. Your thoughts?
My thoughts are I don't have cable. Although I am really hyped about Samurai Jack, although that's technically a sequel.
Yeah, it's the same. I don't watch that much TV anymore, but at the same time, I am really excited about Samurai Jack. I'm cursing the fact that I don't have any way of watching it over here. As for the idea of just cartoon reboots in general, it's one of those things I'm torn by, because On the one hand, as a creative, I would prefer to see new ideas taking the stage, and I really wish corporations would stop trying to bank on nostalgia by basically resetting any continuity in previous series just to try and resort to any iconography like theme songs or particular characters in order to make a quick desperate buck, because it feels like pandering. But at the same time, I will freely admit that yes, I do get nostalgic when I see things like that, and again, my reaction when I saw that Samurai Jack was being rebooted was, yay!
Yeah, mine too, with almost the entire original cast. Rest in peace, Mako Iwamatsu. I'm just infinitely glad they got Greg Baldwin as Aku, because legitimately, whenever he replaced Mako as Uncle Iroh, I almost could not tell the difference.
Indeed, yes. Well, apart from that one funeral tribute to him as well.
Yeah, of course.
So yeah, that sums up my thoughts. I do feel a little bit nostalgic. I just hope they don't burn the whole nostalgia train into the ground.
Yeah, likewise. I think that's about the safest tack to take. And really, I have more faith in the cartoon reboots than I do in the infinite video game reboots.
Yeah, I mean, I was griping earlier about new ideas not taking on, but Steven Universe seems to be insanely popular, so...
Yeah, that it does. And also there's the continuing absurd popularity of Adventure Time and Gravity Falls.
Indeed, and that also reminds me that I've yet to watch any of these series.
A person gets busy.
Oh, geez. Plus, I've already got a million other series to catch up on. My sister is continuously recommending Stranger Things to me, and you're continuously reminding me to finish 11/22/63.
I'm not gonna say I've deliberately been hinting, but I may have been hinting. I did literally just mention 11/22/63 2 questions ago.
Indeed, yes. But yeah, on to the next question, which comes from Luffy McDuck.
Who are your favourite British YouTubers?
That's a hard question to answer, because I'm not subscribed to that many people. Although I will say this, eternally, Necroscope86 needs more love as a YouTuber. Also Kikoskia.
Yeah, I kinda figured you were gonna say that. They're both pretty good YouTubers, and in fact... Speaking of recommendations, I know Vice of Legend has been trying to get me to watch Kikaskia's Let's Play of The Raven Legacy of a Master Thief.
What's funny is, I haven't actually watched that one. Mountain Blade, though. Mountain Blade. I may or may not know the first half of that series by heart at this point, as well as some choice quotes like, "Isn't that the place where they all die? Oh god, my spleen!"
Yeah, there have been many quotes we have shared from that LP with each other.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good Let's Play. Also, on the topic, I cannot recommend the endless epics of Necroscope86's journey through the Fallout games enough.
Okay, I definitely need to catch up with him at some point. From my end, I don't know many British Let's Plays off the top of my head, but two guys I can recommend. Well, one of them is kind of obvious, Little Karibo.
Of course.
Not just for the Yu-Gi-Oh! Brit series, although that is amusing in itself, but also for the Mark Remark, which is a wrestling commentary series that is actually really amusing. Even if you don't know much about wrestling, just the way he recaps it and some of the witty lines he comes up with are just absolutely selling for me.
This year's WrestleMania heavily features a product that is a tedious, time-consuming, money-draining grind that offers little reward and comes with thousands of faceless online personas constantly berating you for sucking at your job or begging for your attention. And as well as all the wrestling, it's also sponsored by Final Fantasy XIV.
Oh god. I still catch myself quoting lines from Yu-Gi-Oh! Abridged sometimes, which is really funny considering I never actually watched that series all the way through. Especially, "Get down, you look very silly up there."
Yeah, that was one of my favourite moments. Also, since we mentioned Team 4-Star earlier, one of the voice actors in that, Masako X, he also has his own separate channel, which is mainly focused on Dragon Ball Z content, mainly recaps of Dragon Ball Super and discussion episodes, kind of what-if stories and the like. So, yeah, if you're a big fan of Dragon Ball Z, I can definitely recommend you check out his channel. Also, he does a really fun Goku voice, just throwing that out there.
Oh yeah, I remember that name. I got voice acting tips from one of his videos.
Yeah, he did voice actor tips on Channel Awesome for a while. I don't know if those videos are still up, but if they are, again, fully recommend, because, yeah, the guy is a good voice actor.
Yeah, I can vouch thereof.
I also have to give a shout out to my friend MVL Gaming. Aside from the Danger Zone collab stuff he's done with me, he also has short Let's Plays of obscure games and pickup videos where he shows off the new additions to his insanely large collection. One last British YouTuber I can recommend. Admittedly, they're more podcasters, but they do post YouTube videos every once in a while. School of Movies, aka Alex and Sharon Shaw. They do some excellent movie analysis and also do excellent radio dramas. New Century, check it out. Seriously, that series needs more love.
I may just have to do that.
Those are all the British YouTubers I can think of, so yeah, if there are any other channels that we didn't mention that you feel need more love, talk about them in the comments section. That's what it's there for.
Our next question comes from IZ.
Favorite Transformers series?
Rutrow. I was one of those weird 90s kids who watched not a bean of Transformers.
In fairness, I didn't watch the initial Transformers series. Like, the closest I think it might have been slightly before my time. Like, I was vaguely aware of its existence. I remember someone gave me, like, an audio cassette of the movie, but otherwise I think the original series was just before my time. I was more of a Power Rangers kid growing up. That said, I was actually a fan of Beast Wars back in the day. This was even before I even realised it was a Transformers series. To be honest, I still do have a fondness for that series, because like many of the Transformers series, it was a commercial to sell toys, but unlike Energon and Armada, which I kind of enjoyed growing up because they were anime series, but they've not stood up to the test of time.
Yeah, so I've heard.
In fact, just briefly, my favourite part of Energon in particular, it was an anime style for the most part, but the robots themselves were in badly done CGI. What was hilarious about that is that there was this ridiculously overly complicated finale, which ended up with Optimus Prime and Megatron tapping into the power of Unicron, which translates into your CGI body suddenly turning into cell animation.
Wow. I'm legitimately impressed.
Like, there's no attempt to explain it. It's just, oh yes, I've tapped into the power of Unicron. And Optimus and Megatron just having this big speech back and forth, and no one's acknowledging that, you suddenly look a bit flatter.
What a way of putting that.
But yeah, Beast Wars I still have a bit of fondness for. Admittedly, there are parts of it that don't hold up either. Like, the first season in particular, a lot of the humor falls flat, and a good chunk of the Maximals come off as big assholes, but,
Oh dear.
But at the same time, once you get past all of that, the characters... It was a series that, by the creator's choice, rather than including every single toy the way some other series have, they focused on a cast of about 5 or 6, so that they did develop a character dynamic, they could have arcs, and in the case of Dinobot, possibly one of the most heartbreaking and yet semi-inspirational deaths, to the point where that was, for the longest time, in fact, in many ways still is, my go-to for how to do a crowning death of awesome.
Ah, yes. I do believe I mentioned the dying moment of awesome as a favorite TV trope of mine, so points.
If you're curious, definitely check out Code of Hero. Basically, for those who don't mind being spoiled, Dinobot takes on the entire Predacon army to save prehistoric man.
Wow. Also, may I just say that's a phrase I never thought I'd hear.
Indeed, and it gets him back to the point where he's so badly damaged that by the time he's facing Megatron, he's fighting him with a stick and he still doesn't give a crap.
That's wonderful.
And also, just to stitch the deal for you, Dinobot is performed by Scott McNeil, and you better believe he gives a damn awesome performance for that.
Well, now once again I think I'm obliged to check this series out, because anyone who knows me knows I have an infinite appreciation for Scott McNeil, especially his role in the FMA Brotherhood bloopers.
Oh god, yes. In fact, actually, there's sadly there's no audio recorded of it, but one hilarious blooper that supposedly happened was during his death speech, Dinobot gives one vaguely witty line to someone he's always had a beef against, and supposedly it was delivered so well that the cast start laughing, to which, while still staying in character, Scott McNeil replied, "Shut up, I'm trying to die here!"
Okay, audience, take a trip with me down memory road for a second. Those of you who have been around a while may remember the Ogre Battle 64 VGT, and the blooper reel, and the line, "Yamil, stop dying, I need a drink." It's like the opposite of that.
Indeed, yes. Speaking of production accidents, this is one other thing that kind of shows you just how much charm and how many happy accidents there were in the Beast Wars. There was a character that was on the bad guy side, some of you may know as Waspinator. After the first few episodes, the writers did not like him at first, because they were pretty much saddled with the gimmick of, because he could transform into a wasp, he had to perform his lines like a wasp, so he was going, "Waspinator is under attack," you know, that kind of thing.
Oh, God. I feel secondhand embarrassment already.
Yeah, and the writers going, okay, you know what? It takes way too long for the voice actor to say these lines, and it's a boring gimmick, but we have to include him because the toy company demands that he's in every episode, so you know what? Let's just have him appear and get him out the way. We'll just say he shows up and then gets shot, or he shows up and then a ball falls on him. And they kept doing this in every episode until eventually they slowly realized that they had a running joke going. So Waspinator just became the universe's butt monkey. Like, literally every single episode he would be blown up, he would be crushed, he would be completely torn apart by a security system.
Oh, God, he's like the Dan Hibiki.
Yeah, and it became so hilarious, in fact, and he became such a beloved character because of it, to the point where when the new series came along and the toy company was saying, yeah, we'd like you to kill off Waspinator, replace it with this toy we can market, the writers begged them to keep Waspinator in and say, no, seriously, this character, you have no idea how much beloved he is by fans, and have you seen this guy? It's hilarious.
That's legitimately wonderful. Not least because, to once again refer to the tropes list that I mentioned, Butt Monkey is another favorite of mine when it's done well, and that's doing it well.
Indeed, yeah. So, despite the respective flaws it has, I will say that Beast Wars is still to this day my favourite Transformers series. I mean, I have heard good things about Transformers Prime, but I have yet to check that out because I'm not sure where you can find it online. I don't know if it's on Netflix or not, but yeah, one of these days it's added to yet another list of things of stuff I should probably watch someday because people keep recommending it to me.
Psst. 11/22/63.
And on the children's cartoon front, Steven Universe, Power Rangers RPM, Star Wars Rebels, and a whole list of other cartoons that are supposedly really amazing.
The last 2 seasons of Legend of Korra.
Oh god, yes, that's another thing.
Just thought I'd be helpful.
Yes, thank you, Sven. Thank you very, very much. I never thought I'd be ecstatic to say this. Moving swiftly on to the Toon Junkie question.
I seem to have a giraffe infestation in my house. I wouldn't mind it so much, but they keep yodeling at all hours of the night. I've heard you can drive them off with a tambourine and trombone, but it doesn't seem to be working. Am I doing something wrong?
Oh, God, were they cursed to yodel by the same character who cursed my one tiefling to do nothing but sing for the rest of her life?
That would make a lot of sense, although, pardon me, Toon Junkie, I don't think you're supposed to be doing that alone. I mean, I applaud your efforts of trying, but you can't really perform with a trombone and a tambourine at the same time, not effectively. So I would recommend just getting someone else to use the tambourine properly.
Yeah, and honestly, a giraffe infestation and they yodel. I think you need a team, like maybe Dark Arts, Arcane. That way you and all your compatriots can stand in a circle around giraffes, say, as your incantation, shaman on you. I'm gonna go throw myself into the River Seine now.
Yes, while Sven purifies himself. Yeah, that brings the Q&A session to an end, so yeah, keep them coming, guys. As always, they've made for a very entertaining section, which covered a wide variety of topics and revealed some things about us. Maybe too much in the case of that pun.
Sorry about that. I just had to go cleanse my soul. I think I found Javert's skeleton, at least.
Oh, is it still dying of embarrassment?
Yeah, I could still hear the wet splat.
Yeah, that was not the best directorial decision, but regardless, it's time to move on to the next section, which for this month is
Crusader Countdowns!
Sup?
In this section, me and Sven count down our top 10, well, if you want to be accurate, 2 top 5s merged into one, based on a topic suggested by Sven. Last time we did our top 10 favourite boss battles. This one is kind of interesting. See, Sven originally suggested top 5 female characters, and I was a little apprehensive because, well, this is kind of the thing. On the one hand, I do get why people make top 10 female character lists because, you know, women have gone through a lot of crap and have been undermined quite a lot in history. So when you do get a positive character written about them because female characters are subject to a lot of bad tropes, then yes, it is something to celebrate. However, the problem with picking a list of characters based purely on their gender is, well, where the hell do you start? They're 50% of the population. It's ridiculous the fact that we have all this sexism and treating women like a minority despite the fact that, again, they're 50% of the population, guys.
Yeah, so, yeah, you can see the reasoning that's gone into the making of this countdown.
Yeah, so we tried to be more specific. So we went back and forth on different ways to narrow it down, and randomly we ended up on the idea of princesses. And at first it seemed a little bit ridiculous, but the more we thought about it, the more we realised that there were some interesting examples of characters that we could easily talk about. You see, the princess trope has been kind of maligned in modern times, which is fair enough considering certain marketing companies, and certain video game companies come to figure it, have basically cemented the idea of the princess being this completely useless character that doesn't have to do anything other than stand there, look feminine and pretty.
Yeah. And I mean, I can't say that I'm always with the nostalgia critic, but I do agree that it's sort of weird that we focus on princesses instead of queens who have accomplished things. But that doesn't necessarily preclude princesses from being awesome.
Indeed, yes. Sometimes, for every stereotypical princess that takes any positive progress back of 5 paces or so, there are some really awesome princesses who kick ass. So that's what we're going to cover today. So yeah, without further ado, let's discuss princesses. A sentence I never thought I would say in my lifetime.
Yeah, looking at my list, I think there's going to be a lot of that.
Indeed, yes. And I'll get started with
Number 5, Jonin.
Okay, this one... this is kind of interesting. I was definitely going to choose a character from Arabian Nights, because, as I mentioned in the Q&A, I've been trying to read through that series recently, and I was going to go with one of the princesses of the many, many stories that's told in that, because there are some really awesome princess characters in there. Admittedly, one of them, despite being a badass shapeshifter who can make a sword out of a single hair, doesn't have a name, which is really odd, and some of them end up with fates that would make George R.R. Martin go, "Oh god, that's vicious and twisted. Why didn't I think of that?"
Wow, that's I'm not sure if that's impressive or scary.
Yeah.
Or both.
Yeah, but then I realized, hang on a moment, one of my favorite characters is technically a princess. I mean, she kind of skips through the process and goes straight to queen, but what the hell.
I mean, it works.
The character's name is Scheherazade. Now, I should probably explain that the Arabian Nights, for those of you who aren't aware, and I probably should have explained this in the Q&A thinking about it, the Arabian Nights is essentially the official published collection that is the origin of many famous Middle Eastern stories such as Aladdin, such as Sinbad, such as Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves, etc, etc, etc. And part of the reason I got into reading the original Arabian Nights volumes is partially because of getting the Middle Eastern context, but also because... Okay, flashback. When I was a child, I had like an audio cassette, and that's already made me sound really freaking old.
I mean, there's no shame in it.
Yeah, basically I had an audio cassette that told these 7 tales of Sinbad the Sailor. But the framing device from it is the exact same framing device in the Arabian Nights. And it's what I've always loved. In fact, I actually preferred the framing device to the story of Sinbad the Sailor, which is kind of strange, but there you go. The story starts with a king, Shayua. Apologies if I butcher the Middle Eastern pronunciation here. Shayua. He was led down by his wife, who deceived him and cheated on him, so he just, as you do, decided that he hated all women. And to get this point across, he decided to make it this big tradition that he was going to marry a random woman from the city each and every night, and then execute them the next morning.
As you do? Man, he gives the entitled bronies I've met online a good name.
Yeah, he probably wasn't the best person. And then one day he turns to his royal vizier and says, "Hi, good news! I selected your daughter Scheherazade as my next candidate. Go to your home and let her know what's going on, will you?" So he goes home to report this, sobbing all the way, because one other thing, there is a lot of weeping in the Arabian Nights. People are very passionate in that regard.
So in other words, it's like all the incessant manly crying done in Fist of the North Star.
Basically, yeah. Whilst he's weeping, Scheherazade, in the very basic version of the story, she just instantly agrees to it. In the original version, and this is something which kind of gives an inkling of why I love her already, she just very calmly says, "That's okay, I'll do it. I've actually got a plan for this." And her father goes, "Wait, no, Scheherazade, you do realise he's going to kill you, right? I'm going to stop you no matter what. Have you not heard the story of the cockerel and the dog?" And he then goes on to tell her this parable, which is, well, to cut the long story short, the cock basically suggests to someone that if a woman comes up with an idea that could be inconvenient for everyone, beat her until she forgets the idea, which is one of the few times where cock is the most appropriate name for someone. But anyway,
Something Game of Thrones joke.
Indeed. The father tells the story and then says, "Scheherazade, if you do not forget this idea of marrying the king, I am going to lock you into a closet and then do exactly the same thing to you." And Scheherazade's response is, "No, you won't. Go and tell the king I wish to marry him, please." "Yes, dear."
Oh my god, I love her. I've never read this, and I already love the star of the show.
So, her plan goes like this. She says to the king, "One thing, see, I used to have this tradition where I would tell a story to my younger sister every single night. And since this might be my last night on this earth, would you mind if she just came to our bedroom so I could tell her this story before we go to bed?" And the king says, "Yeah, I can grant that last request as long as you die the next morning." So, this goes ahead, and she starts telling the story during the night, but just as it's getting to the good bit, she leaves it on a cliffhanger. And the king goes, wait, you can't just end the story there, what happens?" Well, to be honest, it's a much longer story. I'm not going to be able to tell it all. It's not the sort of thing you can rush. And the thing is, we just run out of time. And frankly, I want to get some shut-eye in before my impending death. And the king goes, fine. We'll delay the execution until the morning afterwards, just as long as you bloody tell me what happens in the story. So the second night comes on, and again, she leaves it on a cliffhanger. And once again, the king wants to find out what happens next, and then goes on for another night. And then another night, and then another night, and then when she finally gets to the end of that story, the king goes, yes, it's so good we were able to finish that story before we die. And then Scheherazade goes, yes, I suppose it is. It's a pity I didn't get to tell you the story about the City of Gold, though. What story about the City of Gold? No, I'm sure you'll be able to find it out someday. Okay, fine, delay the execution, we'll find out about the City of Gold.
Okay, so basically, she puts off the inevitable, presumably for 1,001 days and nights.
Exactly, yes.
All by using Matt Mercer's storytelling.
Yep.
That is legitimately incredible.
Yeah, and that's... Basically, I just wanted to see the original context of this story because I freaking love it, because not only is it... She's a very unique heroine in the fact that she just uses the fact that she's a great storyteller and some smarts to basically, well, like you said, avoid death for 1,001 nights. And it's even more impressive in the original context because, well, the best way I can describe it is she was doing Inception before Inception was even a thing. There is the story of the fisherman and the djinn, or the creatures that would eventually be known as genies. And whilst telling that story, there is a moment where the fisherman has the djinn at his mercy, and the djinn goes, wouldn't you consider showing me mercy? And the fisherman goes, no, I cannot do that. Have you not heard the story of the king and the wanderer? So you've already got a story within a story within a story, and then within that, there will be a moment where the wanderer will say to the king, but have you heard of the story of Sinbad and the hawk? And so yet another story is added, and it keeps dragging out this way.
This is the most writerly Xanatos Gambit I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, and it goes on, like you said, for 1,001 nights until she eventually runs out of stories, and by then, the king has become so enamored with Scheherazade that he decides, you know what? Let's just call off the whole thing. I'd just rather spend the rest of my days with you, in all honesty. And that just ends his entire rampage of death, which kind of leads to the fact that Scheherazade actually means Saviour of the City in Arabic.
Okay, may I just point out that Scheherazade's entire existence is basically just a reflection on why we're doing this countdown? Literature beats sexism.
Yep, that's exactly it. That's why I've included her here, because, yeah, technically she doesn't really have any, personality or arc, but the very idea of her speaking to the power of storytelling, it's honestly an incredibly inspiring element, and it's like Sven said, it's part of the reason why we're doing this.
It's sort of the whole point. And that's honestly wonderful. I mean, it's especially impressive given that, like we said, the very first English language edition of this compilation was published in 1706.
Indeed, yes. So, that's me for number 5. How about you, Sven?
It's funny how we always do, well, I say always, we've only done 2 of these, but it's funny how it's been working out that we've been doing sort of parallels to one another in each of our respective countdowns. Speaking of heroines who prove that you don't really need to be action-oriented to be a worthwhile character and member of the team.
Number 5, Sven.
From Final Fantasy IX, Garnet Till Alexandros.
Nice.
Now, I'll admit that some of my contributions to this countdown may be based a lot on nostalgia, but I'm of the opinion that Garnet's character arc really honestly holds its own even today, even 17 years after the release of Final Fantasy IX. Because it sort of proves something that, possible future entries on this very list, proves that one does not have to be a really terribly written, quote-unquote, strong female character fighting on the front lines of battle to be a completely solid character. Garnet is, on the surface, a total stereotype. Like, white mage, very feminine, sort of demure, hilariously naive. But underneath is the soul of an adventurer, to the point that in order to escape the wretched harpy that has raised her for the last 17 years, she actually asks Zidane and crew to be kidnapped. Which I love, even today.
Indeed, yes. And also, just to rub it in the face that she's the white mage archetype, the outfit she uses to escape is the classic white mage outfit from Final Fantasy I.
Yeah, from Final Fantasy I. If I had faith in Final Fantasy writers to go this deep, I really don't. Final Fantasy's just pretty silly in general. But if I did have faith in their rule of symbolism, I'd almost think that the white mage outfit was sort of a reflection on expectations for Garnet's character, which totally don't play out at all. In the case that I mean for a white mage and a princess, in a Final Fantasy game, she actually has a character.
Yeah, I will admit I only got about halfway through Final Fantasy IX, partially due to time and also because my disc suddenly started breaking, which is kind of irritating, but
I believe it or not, I know that exact pain.
But it is kind of fun to watch her in earnest try to learn how to disguise herself as the common man with mixed results.
Yeah, I mean, it's legitimately hilarious seeing a sheltered, highborn princess just tossed into the common world like, "Ah, yes, good sir, madame, I am 100% like you. There is nothing remarkable about me at all. No, sir, indeed, not at all."
My favourite example being when she just sort of picks up an oolong and the little lady goes, "Oh, that's strange. Young girls usually hate oolongs." Pause. Ah!
Quick, find a way to fit in. And honestly, that's just one layer of her character development, because over the course of the story, I mentioned the wretched harpy who raised her and who, as it turns out, actually baby-napped her. Well done on the humanity thing there, Queen Brane. But over the course of the story, Garnet has to deal with, not exactly confronting the woman who raised her, but certainly dealing with her various attempts to continue fucking up her life. She has to deal with the complete destruction of her kingdom, another kingdom, at one point being so traumatized that she goes mute, which in fact leads to probably gave me my love for the story-relevant haircut trope. And of course there's the fact that Garnet has to contend with Kuja. All of Kuja being all up and infatuated with her.
Yeah.
Honestly, it just stands to me as a testament that, like I said, you don't have to emulate the whole Lara Croft 80 miles distant personality to be a relevant and honestly powerfully written female character. And may I also add, as a sort of nod to that one series that shall not be named, that we keep on naming and poking fun at, Garnet accomplished something that Sansa Stark has had 5 books and 8 seasons to do, and has failed in every regard, and that is being a relevant character without being a fighter.
Yeah, I mean, people claim that Sansa's doing some of that, but not really. She's just been victimized, and her big moments have just been saying the right sentence at the right time, or knowing who to call at some points.
Pretty much. It's the difference between a pinball protagonist and an actual protagonist. Things just happen to Sansa, and she just happens to be there to take them. Garnet actually makes things happen. I mentioned the fact that she actually asks to be kidnapped, which starts literally the entire game. And just on top of all of that, she's just generally likable. She's not a wishy-washy princess. She's not that god-awful strong female character overused trope typically written by male writers thinking with their privates. She's just a good character on her own. And in the days of edgy fiction, I think that holds more weight than ever.
Indeed, yes.
So for being a well-done, light-hearted, princessly princess who we can actually like and who actually does things, at number 5, welcome to the list, Garnet.
Yep, that is a good entry. And, this next character kind of goes on a similar theme to Garnet, purely unintentionally, I might add. Specifically because I kept swapping the order of these characters around for another time, but...
Number 4!
Melia, from Xenoblade Chronicles.
Oh, right, I forgot she was a princess.
Yeah, admittedly I did too for a while. In fairness, that's kind of because one plot point is that she actually wears a mask throughout most royal ceremonies, so most people don't actually know she's the princess when walking around without it, which is...
Including Xenoblade fans.
Yeah, which is kind of interesting. Melia is a character who joins fairly late into Xenoblade Chronicles. She starts to join when they get into the second half of the world, heading towards the upper reaches, and they start to meet the High Entia, which are basically people with wings. That's the best way I can describe it.
I mean, if all else fails, simple works.
Indeed, yes. And I put her on here for 2 reasons. One, fun fact for Doctor Who fans, she is voiced by Jenna Louise Coleman, aka Clara.
In a much better role.
Indeed, yes. Second, she has a very similar thing with Garnet, as in, she ends up having to go through a lot of crap.
Yep. I seem to recall that. Sort of everything happens.
Yeah, well, let me put it this way. The first time you meet her, she's meant to be doing a task of taking care of a dangerous Telethia, along with her 4 royal guards. All the royal guards die.
Oh, you will be missed, maroon shirts.
Yeah, she's already struggling to deal with the guilt of that the first time you meet her, and actually, fun fact, later on in the game there's a side quest where you have to face the grieving relatives of that scenario.
Oh my god, that gives a whole new meaning to video game cruelty. Make us face the relatives of the people who have died.
Yeah, no, got it. It kind of only gets worse from here, because when she meets our hero, she has to go through the succession ritual. Unfortunately, one of the high-ranking royals tries to have her killed because she's technically half Hyentia, half Homs, basically humans. Xenoblade's yet another Japanese fantasy where you can't just call a human human, you have to call it a Bjork or a Homs or a Humor or whatever, so...
Call a human a smearp.
Basically, yeah. So, during the royal test, she has to deal with multiple assassination attempts. In the later part of the story, she has to watch her father die right in front of her, so she's told that she will be getting the royal succession much sooner than she originally planned. Then, without giving away too much, several cataclysmic events happen that means she has a lot less subjects to rule than she started with.
Something, red wedding.
Yep, and then her brother gets turned into this terrifying monster which she has to face. It's basically what I'm saying is she goes through a lot of crap, like so much, and yet she somehow manages to hold it all together and act like a professional. Well, it's kind of weird to say that about a princess, but you know what I mean. She manages to remain resolute and focus on the task at hand, despite going through so many situations that would leave a normal person curled up in a fetal position and crying.
Yeah, I mean, that takes some serious fortitude.
Yeah, and it also doesn't help that she has developed feelings for the main character Shulk, but she kind of knows deep down that it's never gonna go anywhere because, well, she has to compete with the childhood friend who has, let's just say, literally given up her life for him in many cases, so...
Yeah, I seem to recall that's a thing that happens.
Yeah, so basically, Melia seems to be getting the short end of the stick in life, and yet at the same time, she still, again, manages to keep herself together and focus on the task at hand and get what needs to be done. So, yeah, it's not exactly a very complicated character arc, but it's still kind of endearing to see someone not wanting to give up despite everything that happens to them, and believe you me, a lot happens to her.
Yeah.
It's a simple reason, but that's the reason why Melia occupies my number 4 spot. It's just, damn girl, you need some positive luck in your life.
Here's to you, Melia, for surviving through what would put most of us firmly in therapy.
Indeed, yes.
Now, speaking of characters who are sort of, run through the ringer, as they say,
Number 4.
Monica Raybrand from Dark Cloud 2. Excuse me, Jonin, while I talk about this series, you have no idea what I'm talking about.
Fair enough, I admittedly did that with Arabian Nights and Xenoblade, so go ahead.
Again, I suspect that nostalgia may have a firm role to play in my choice of Monica for number 4, but bear with me, because the nostalgia sort of had an effect on me, and honestly just how I write and view well-written female characters nowadays. It should be noted that out of all the characters on this list, Monica was actually the first one I encountered, which is saying something about how long it took me to get into one series on this list, but I'll get into that. So, Jonin, before I get into this, let me just prime you for something by saying, tell me if any of this sounds familiar. Okay, Monica's story literally starts off Dark Cloud 2. The prologue puts the player in the position of Monica, as her home kingdom is being mercilessly invaded by the forces of the evil Mark Hamill, Emperor Griffin, and fighting her way through the halls of the castle by literally stealing a sword from a suit of armor. She reaches the throne room literally just in time to see one of the entries from my last list, that is Gaspard, put a sword right through her father. Now, normally, like was the case with Melia from Xenoblade, you would expect that seeing such a thing would send most people squarely to a psychologist, but what does Monica do? Does she accept it? Does she fall into despair? No, she takes her royal family's crown jewel, one of 2 world-altering stones called the Atlamelia, seeks out the services of a great sage named Crest, and time travels 100 years into the past to kick Griffin's ass before he can ever do anything to her people.
Oh, wow.
Tell me, does that not sound like a certain time-traveling character from Fire Emblem?
It does, yes.
Definitely not a spoiler warning for a future entry on this list. But,
yeah, no, definitely not at all.
But, yeah, as far as reactions to your homeland having the shit kicked out of it and your father being murdered, I'd say that's pretty appropriate.
It is definitely some quick thinking, not gonna lie.
I mean, one would think that most of the time anyone in that situation would at least take time to grieve, but no, Princess Monica Raybrand springs into action and deigns to kill Mark Hamill before he can f*** anything else up. And again, in doing so, you would expect Monica to sort of fall into a grim personality trope, and she is assertive, fierce, and kick-ass, but she's also just an immensely fun character, and knows how to make an entrance. I say that because first chapter of the game, Monica spends her time helping lead protagonist Max in the guise of a seemingly space-defying young boy with absurd pink hair, who just occasionally gives Max tips. When Monica actually reveals herself, it's absolutely spectacular, by which I mean her little boy form appears on top of a train as a killer clown. I wish I was kidding, there's a killer clown in this game named Mr. Flotsam, is about to murder the shit out of Max with dynamite. She casts off her glamored disguise, literally leaps forward, cuts Flotsam to ribbons, and kicks him off the train.
Nice.
As far as entrances go, again, I'd say that's pretty appropriate.
Indeed, yes.
And just generally, her character is so enjoyable. Like, again, compared to the grim, dark games that we get nowadays, just the style of Dark Cloud 2 stands out and is really bright and colorful, and Monica especially applies. And in terms of personality, there's everything that I mentioned before, plus the fact that despite everything that's happened to her, she actually maintains compassion in the face of being a badass. I mentioned Gaspard in my top 5 video game bosses, and how his life was basically just one long running gag in which he was the butt of the joke, and despite the fact that he murdered the shit out of Monica's father, she actually finds it in herself to forgive him and feel sorry for his god-awful past in his last moments. After which she swears, doubly so, to kick Griffin's ass into last century. Just, all in all, a really likable, standout, colorful character, who, if I ever have to face an emergency situation like she had to face, I really hope I react like she does with the quick thinking thing.
Indeed, yes. I mean, it's always nice when you do have characters like Melia who go for a lot and just keep going, but it is also nice to have a bit of personality and lightheartedness as well. It's kind of the reason why I like stuff like Xenoblade and the Tales of series, in that it's good to have dark moments and character arcs and all of that, but it is also good to have a little fun here and there as well.
Yeah, and just for one more reinforcing point of what I mean about Monica's character, spoiler alert for those of you who are willing to pay the $150 it costs to buy a copy of Dark Cloud 2 nowadays, at the very end of the game, after sad farewells with Max, Monica returns to her homeland and finds that, much like Jake Epping, changing the past has had sort of unintended consequences. And nobody actually knows who she is anymore. She is irrelevant. What does she do in the face of this? She goes back to Crest, time travels to the past again, and interrupts Max in the middle of fighting a robot version of the same killer clown. Like, sup?
Okay, let's do it again and do it right this time.
Yeah, like, I'm stuck here, let's go at it again. And honestly, just for fun factor, and the impact that such an enjoyable character had on 10-year-old me, for paving the way for how to do a proper traumatized character without jumping right headfirst into grimdark. At number 4, welcome to the list, Monica.
Nice. And I've mentioned one of these series before, and frankly you would be surprised if one of them wasn't on this list at this point. My entry for
Number 3, Jonin.
Alicia from Tales of Zestria. Surprisingly, given that the Tales series has a big cast, there's only really 3 princesses I can think of. There is Alicia, Estelle, and Natalia. They're all interesting characters in their own right, but they often come off as the weaker characters. I mean, it's not to say that they're bad, it's just that, well, in the case of Natalia, while she does have an interesting character arc, she's up against the likes of Luke, Jade, Tyr, and Guy, so,
Yeah, I mean, how can you really stack up?
Yeah, it's kind of like having to share a stage with Christopher Lee, Benedict Cumberbatch. Basically, what I'm saying is, you can act your hardest, but you're up against a lot of star power.
Yeah, pretty much. It's like being Nick Jonas on the stage of the Les Mis 25th Anniversary Edition trying to compete with Al Febo and Norm Lewis.
Yeah, so they tend to have a lot to go up against, and I was trying to decide between the 3 of them, and I ended up coming back to Alicia for one specific reason. But before I get to that reason, I should probably explain a bit about her. She is kind of the one that ends up bringing the story into motion, because the world of Zestria has these spirits called Seraphim that take care of the land, and our main character, Saray, is raised by an entire village of them. He's one of the few humans that's born with the ability to see them, and so he kind of lives in a legendary mystical place for a long time. So imagine his surprise when the first human he's seen for ages, Alicia, pops in. She is a princess, although she is so far away from the line of succession, as in, the only way she would actually make the jump to queen would be if the entire royal house burned to the ground and a couple more distant cousins were sick that day, so...
So, super minor princess.
Yeah. With that in mind, she decides, you know what, I'm going to do something significant. I am going to try and be a knight. And she also has a great fascination with ancient myths and legends, so she decides that she's going to hunt for ancient legends. Specifically, the village of Origins, where the supposed shepherd, aka Chosen One, is supposed to be located, which leads to her finding Sorey. And getting her back home, and then Sorey discovering that he is the shepherd, or at least the best candidate for it, is basically what kicks off the entire story of Tales of Zestria. And you then find out more about Alicia's position, and it's very interesting. Like I said, she is a knightly character who very much believes in the ideals of the knight, in that she believes that she needs to be a servant she needs to be a shield to protect innocent people from harm, and also use her kindness and valor to make sure that she can help as many people as possible. Unfortunately, a lot of the main themes of Zestria are positivity and idealism in the face of a reality that, well, for lack of a better term, sucks. Like, she continually going up against a council that really is looking out for themselves and wants to invade the neighbouring country of Roland so that they can conquer it and get more power. So they are, if not openly insulting her, basically giving her a load of crappy jobs like, oh, why don't you go over to this plague town of Marland? I'm sure you'll be able to do something useful over there. Sure, just head over there, princess. That's good, that's good. Go far away from here as possible. She then gets a bit of a reprieve because Sorey gains the powers of the shepherd, and he finds that he can also appoint someone with enough spiritual resonance, basically the ability to see Seraphim. He can appoint them as a squire, who can accompany him and tap into the same level of power. And the first person he picks is Alicia, because she is a good person who actually thinks a lot like Sorey. It's at a point where they both kind of nerd out over old myths and legends in a way that's kind of cute.
Living up to the legacy of Rain.
Yeah, basically. Unfortunately, Sorey was told about the side effects earlier, but he doesn't mention it, is the fact that doing so, especially considering that Alicia has kind of a low spiritual resonance when you get down to it, is that it kind of takes a great toll on him. And initially he's kind of put it on a brave face and no one notices it, but it then gets readily apparent that during one of the missions, several party members get put in danger because he's putting so much strain in himself he can't actually see.
Wow. That's pretty bad.
Yeah, so Alicia is obviously disappointed, but she kind of recognizes what this means and goes, okay, you know what, there are better things I can do in the meantime, so, Sorey, it's probably best that you go on without me. Don't worry, it'll be okay, I will find some way to help out here. So, it's obviously a crushing blow to her dreams, but again, it's really nice that she kind of recognizes, okay, it's sad, but I will do what's the best for the kingdom and then carry on. Unfortunately, her efforts don't go very well. Long story short, the war starts anyway.
Oh dear.
And on top of all of that, some of her efforts to be more proactive, she attempts to do so without really kind of studying politics so much. So there's one scene where she tries to actively stop what she sees as criminal activity, only to discover that it was a sting operation by the espionage units within her own kingdom, so...
Oh, God. It's like an innocent version of our president f***ing with the FBI.
Yes, it's basically her innocence and naivete is basically landing her in a lot of trouble, and then it comes to the big moment, which taps into the main point I was building up to. In a moment which, I will freely admit, comes right the f*** out of nowhere, her mentor and strongest confidant, Maltram, a kind woman who taught her the ideals of a knight being a shield and the kindness protecting the weak, turns out to be working for the Lord of Darkness.
May I just ask how?
Just...
And why?
Why and how I don't actually know. It's just suddenly, like, literally in a dungeon that's not connected to her in any way. It's just they contain this ultimate sword of power, but before they can dispose of it, she leaps in front of it, grabs it, and goes, "Yes, I am evil, and I have been all along!" And then leaves. It's...
Wow, Kratos, she is not.
Yeah, it's one of the weakest / dumbest points in all of Zestria, to be brutally honest. But the reason I forget of it is that it does actually lead to kind of a cool moment in that Saray decides not to tell Alicia at first, but then it kind of gets to a point where they have no choice because another one of their party members is out and Alicia pops in to make up the numbers, and by this point Saray... It still takes a strain on him, but he's had enough training to the point where he can sustain it without doing too much damage to himself. And the two of them go to confront Maltram, believing that maybe she's just being mind-controlled or whatever. And Maltram reveals right in front of Alicia that, no, I've basically been evil the entire time. Alicia is obviously heartbroken by this and goes, "Wait, but... Maltram, you were the one who taught me all of these ideas. You were the one who taught me to stand up for innocent people. Why?" And Maltram goes, "Yes, I taught you that because I wanted to start the war. See, with you being so continuously proactive and making a fuss and rallying the people over every single minor issue, the council, the bunch of self-serving douches, get panicky. They stop being subtle and eventually cut straight to the point, hence them invading Roland with no plans whatsoever."
Wow. Basically, they were forced to Leroy Jenkins it.
Yeah, so her ideals are pretty much crumbling down around her because it turns out the mentor was using them as a scheme to make everything worse, and to top it off, Maltram, in another grim moment, when she's heavily injured from a boss battle, she walks up to Alicia, who is asking if she's alright. She goes, "Oh, Alicia, you are such kind, gentle eyes." She then grabs Alicia's spear and runs herself through with it before saying, "That is what I've always hated about you."
Wow, subtle.
Yeah, so this all leads into a scene which, again, kind of encapsulates not only one of the themes of Zestria, but also the main defining character point that I like about both her and Saray. Because, obviously, that was a lot to take in at once. And, so Saray goes to find her after she initially runs off, and Alicia kind of has a completely understandable breakdown where she goes, "Okay, you know what? I'm done. I have had enough of it. Just let the council and their goons do whatever they want. Enough of the gossip, enough of the lies. I'm so fucking sick of this." But despite all that, after she has the breakdown, there's like a pause and then Saray goes, "But you still want to stop the war, don't you?" Because that is the defining point of both Saray and Alicia go through. They have basically seen the worst of humanity time and time again. They have both been in situations where good intentions have basically amounted to making situations worse. But no matter what, they can't let go of it because at the end of the day, they're still too nice to just let the whole world burn. So that is really the most admirable trait about both characters, and it's why I felt the need to put on this list after doing some thinking about it, because it's one thing to stay resolute in the times of hardship, it's another thing to be nice in a world where it gives you no reason to, frankly.
Yeah, so basically what we're getting at is screw you, cynicism.
Basically, yeah. That's the lot and sort of why I'm including Alicia on this list. It's nice to see someone's naive ideals clashing with reality, but still maintaining the kindness afterward.
Yeah, and it's really, really funny that you should say that, given number 3 on my list. Shall we move on?
Indeed.
Number 3, Sven.
Alencia Rydell Crimea from Fire Emblem 9, Path of Radiance.
Oh, yes. I'll be honest, if Sven hadn't included it on his list, I would have.
Yep, I think with the exception of my number one, the next few entries on our list are gonna be pretty similar. Like, characters that we both appreciate. And Olyncia is one of them. May I just say that I am forever bitter that she was not a proper lord in Fire Emblem 10, and instead we got Bargain Ichigo Ike, and the wonder that is Micaiah. So, in a lot of ways, Olyncia as a character is very, very similar to both Monica and Garnet. In terms of personality, she's a lot like Garnet. She's been sheltered her whole life, she's very naive, very idealistic, hilariously well-spoken. I'm talking, of course, about that one give them a sound thrashing scene. And, like Monica, through the course of the game, she's put through the ringer. And I mean both games.
Oh god, yes.
I mean, like Monica, she sort of saw her kingdom be horribly invaded. She wasn't present for the murder of her parents, but believe me, they got the murdered out of them. She thinks her uncle is dead, she thinks her best friends are dead, and essentially, she's left in the company of the Grail mercenaries, with literally nothing to her name but her fancy clothes and her ideals. Which, in the face of everything she goes through, even the human slime that is Ludwig in Radiant Dawn, she never gives up her ideals.
Indeed, yes, and it also should be noted that it maybe seem like she's alone throughout the startup path of Radiant, but it should be noted, in earlier cutscenes, she actively says, I've been in sword training, I can help you. It's just the fact that, well, they were hired as mercenaries to guard her. Ike's professionalism will not let her get involved.
Yeah, pretty much. So she makes it clear from the start that she could be contributing, but Ike and the Grail mercenaries are professionals, and Dayan's pretty tenacious. Let's just put it like that. And of course, this all inevitably comes to a head. You cannot hint at a character having combat training without them joining the field of battle, and I'm sure that this is the part Jonin really, really likes about Olyncia as a unit, because she's basically in both games the ultimate Pegasus Knight.
Oh, you know me so well.
I know your strengths and weaknesses, and both of them are Pegasus Knights.
Yes, indeed. I say, looking at my Fire Emblem heroes team that consists of flyers.
And I will say this, despite the fact that Olyncia was never given the status of a proper lord, you wouldn't know it looking at her stats. Like, in Path of Radiance, she may be outclassed by Marcia, but it's gonna be close. And in Radiant Dawn, stat-wise, she's friggin' brutal. Which, when you couple with the fact that she has her own PRF sword, which acts as a brave weapon, is absolutely mad. So, in terms of character, she's solid, and in terms of stats and as a unit, holy crap.
Yep, indeed. And this is all before we get to that part I talked in my own review of Radiant Dawn, her own story arc, i.e. my favourite arc in that entire game.
Oh yeah. Radiant Dawn Part 2. AKA, goodbye my feelings.
Yeah, it's, again, that kind of, wow, we're really good at the unintentional themes. It's, again, someone's naive ideals having to compromise with reality in that she doesn't want to hurt any of her citizens, but a large chunk of them are starting a revolt.
Yes, and this is honestly where Fire Emblem idealism clashes with Game of Thrones cynicism, because in Part 2, the main antagonist of Olyncia's story is a duke who can only be described, as I said earlier, as human slime. Ludwig is basically Littlefinger in heavy armor. Playing on the cynicism and hatred of everyone, to the point where I'm amazed that his slogan was not "Make Crimea Great Again."
Oh, God. Although it might as well be, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, as individuals, those two are practically interchangeable. But it's one of those rare instances where we actually get to see a princess become a queen and rule. And may I just say that the whole princess becoming a queen theme was done way better in the Tellius games than it was in Frozen. I really hate to rag on Disney, but I have things to say about Frozen.
And I will say right now, they're not the number one. In fact, they're not even on this list.
Yeah, I'd say at least for myself that the princesses in Frozen aren't even in my honorable mentions. Expect Disney, though.
And now I need to raise my walls again.
But yeah, it's one of those rare instances where we actually get to see a princess lead and have to make some really, really, really hard decisions. And even in the face of that, Alicia throws Ludwig's manipulation and cynicism right out the door and basically tells him to his face, yeah, it doesn't matter how much you blackmail me, you're gonna rot in here for trying to wreck Crimea. Which, as far as a polite, demure character goes, is pretty badass.
Indeed, yes.
And may I add also that Alicia does this while being the absolute model of Fire Emblem-style princessly femininity, so you can be regal and glorious and still kick 80 kinds of ass, both politically and physically.
Indeed, yes.
And honestly, whenever I put it like that, a lot of you are probably wondering how anyone can possibly beat that. Yeah, to which I say, over to you, Jonin.
Indeed, we have 2 more to go, and unfortunately, I'm gonna break it, because this character is something that, well, I'm familiar with, Sven and a large number of people haven't, because it's actually from an audio drama. One I've mentioned a couple of times, in fact, I've also recently mentioned it in the QandA.
Number 2, Jonin.
Gwendolyn from The New Century, The Princess Thieves.
I like where this is going, but I definitely don't know what you're talking about, so please carry on.
Indeed. Okay, so I've already mentioned the audio series New Century a couple of times, and whilst it is mostly, as I said, Civil War America fighting off werewolf zombies, occasionally they like to break off into side series. I've already reviewed Tiger's Eye, which was a one where they decide to go into another dimension with cat people. This one was when they decided to go into England. It's set in Victorian age London, and things have changed considerably because not only did the werewolf zombies come over and mess things up a little bit, another portal opened, which opened the doors to 2 other races, the Dwart and the Arca, who both know magic. Basically, we've got dwarves and orcs in Victorian London.
May I just say, steampunk is one of my biggest weaknesses, and you've just found the only way to make it better. Add fantasy.
Oh god, yes. So, Gwendolyn is the main character of this series, and it's actually kind of funny. Part of the reason I included her on this list, apart from giving New Century some love, is also the fact that, because Alex Shaw freely admitted that a large chunk of The Princess Thieves was inspired by Disney films, she actually covers a lot of archetypes that Disney princess normally goes through. Because she kind of starts off that she's going to be part of an arranged marriage as one of the few surviving members of the human royal family, which has had to coexist with the dwarf royal family that has merged with it, including King Coriolanus, who is sort of that kind of the sort of king that is very stoic and one that doesn't really say anything mean, but you still really don't want to mess with him. But yeah, as part of the whole pageantry and making her queendom official, she's going to be involved in an arranged marriage with a dwarf noble. And she's going to go through that whole Disney thing of, is there something more to this? Is this going to be my last few nights of freedom, etc.? So that general archetype of eventually going out into the world and meeting a dashing young rogue, in this case a dwarf who goes by the alias of Robin, as in Robin Hood. And
Robin Dwarf.
Indeed, yes. And going on an adventure where she learns more about the world and herself. Where the other element comes in is that, the reason she gets kidnapped by the thieves, which eventually turns into her going winningly, and kind of a reflection of Garnet, yeah.
I was about to say, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, the reason she's going out there is because she's kind of entertaining a hobby where she gets her handmaid, a grumpy dwarf named Lila, to put her in a disguise so she can entertain another hobby of hers. bare-knuckle street fights.
As, you know, royals do. Man, sort of emulating Teddy Roosevelt right there.
Yeah, see, her first experience taking part in a street fight, which is, wow, I got beaten within an inch of my life. That was awesome!
I love this character already.
Yeah, so she kind of goes through, again, like I said, that Disney arc, which has many shades of Garnet in that... In fact, it has a lot more parallels to Garnet from Final Fantasy IX and the First Four, because it does go through that same thing of she spends some time with the rogues, disguises herself as a common person, and then gets to know just how terrible things are right now. In this case, playing on the fact that England is a society that places way too much emphasis on class for the rogue.
Yeah, I've sort of noticed.
Yeah, especially in Victorian era, where, let's just say, the pay gap is intense.
I've also heard as such in that regard, too.
Yeah, so she kind of learns about the state of the world, and then just how cruel and despicable her kingdom's generals can be, so she decides, okay, I have to go back and try to improve things by taking the reins from my father. So it's a kind of fairly standard arc in that sense, but what really makes it shine are the little details in there. There's one good example of this where they start trying, again in parallel to Garnet, teaching her how to walk and look like a common person. And Robin is surprised that she actually starts picking it up really well. And she kind of bluntly says, as a princess, I've been told that I have to carry myself off for every single situation. I have multiple types of walks. In essence, my body is always on loan.
Ha! I've never heard it put quite like that.
Yeah. That's kind of the joy of New Century, is that it takes all the standard archetypes and goes that little bit deeper into them. New Century always delves deeper into the political environment of their fantasy settings at the best of the times, and this goes that little bit further, especially in regards to Gwen's character and her feelings on basically everything that's going on around her, just realizing just how sheltered she is, just what the full extent of the whole poverty gap is, and again, running parallel with other characters, her naive attempts to fix it basically blowing up in her face in one way or another.
That seems to be a running theme.
I won't go into too much spoilers because it is kind of a recent series, but I will say that the way she eventually decides to handle it actually kind of parallels Atlinsia as well, in that she ultimately manages to A, find a compromise, and B, to throw it back in the face of the guy who's essentially trying to blackmail her.
Wow, we keep doing that, and honestly, I'm not opposed to it. I love the parallels because they're good on just about any character we've mentioned.
Indeed, yes. Plus, well, let's say the way the series ends is that she's now leading an expedition into a fantasy land in order to try and gain additional allies, which, yeah, let's just say I'm looking forward to that series, especially given the... Oh god, I wish I could talk about this final line. Okay, you know what? I'm just going to add a spoiler tag here, so maybe skip 30 seconds. Her final line in the series is, she's basically being told about the existence of drakes, aka intelligent dragons, and she goes, yes, they are a terrifying race that even the dwarves are afraid of. Let's go and recruit them.
That right there is basically the plot of every Dragon Age game in a nutshell.
Indeed, yes. So, for managing to add new spins on a good old archetype, as well as being multiple layers of badass in her own right, I present to you Gwendolyn from the Princess Thieves. If you haven't yet, go download the books and the audio podcast. Trust me, it's worth it. Also, nothing else on a completely related side note, I actually appear in that as an extra, so...
Sweet. If there's ever another call for extras, I'm auditioning the shit out of that. Moving quickly on, back to my side of things. It was unbelievably hard to choose between my number 1 and 2 entries on this list, but I think I've finally settled on an order in which to put them. And really, anyone familiar with fictional princesses will probably not be at all surprised by this entry.
Number 2, Sven.
Leia Organa from most of Star Wars.
Yeah, it's a pretty significant character, which makes it all the more surprising that I didn't think of this before Sven brought it up.
I'm sort of glad that I was able to claim Leia for my list, because I got the wonder that is Gwendolyn. So, but honestly, what is there to say about Leia that hasn't been said for the last 40 years? She basically pioneered the badass princess role. And character-wise, well, are you really surprised that I like her so much? She kicks ass in a fight, she's an expert with political maneuvers, she's a deadpan snarker, and she is also possibly the only decent shot with a blaster in the entire Star Wars universe.
Yeah, that pretty much nails it. In fact, it kind of says something when she's the one that has to salvage a butchered rescue operation that's meant to get her out of jail.
Yeah, she legitimately has to rescue herself because at that point in time, Luke and Han have no idea what they're doing. Just sort of the team's common sense voice. Again, also the voice of Snark, which you know me. I appreciate a good witty comeback. And there is no one better at witty comebacks than Leia Organa. I point you to the Nerf Herder line as just one of many in the first Star Wars movie. Excuse me, in the original trilogy. And it's another rare situation because with Leia and the sequel trilogy, at least the first 2 movies in the sequel trilogy, we actually get to see a princess who has moved beyond being a princess, has been a senator, and is now a general in her elderly years. That's awesome.
Indeed, yes, it was nice to see her back in that role for the very brief appearance.
And she and Han as the old married couple. Literally, the old married couple.
Oh.
And then, of course, things happen in both real life and that movie that give me feelings.
Yeah, R.I.P.
Yeah, but really, any list like this has to feature Leia on it somewhere, because as far as pioneering princesses go, there is no one more trailblazing than Leia Organa. From A New Hope to The Last Jedi, for kicking ass before virtually any other on-screen princess kicked ass, at number 2 I present to you the classic badass princess. Also, rest in peace, Carrie Fisher. Your death was so terrible it almost made me forget about the rest of 2016. And then the inauguration happened. Sorry.
Let's not bring that up again.
I swear it's going to be my running joke until we finally vote him out. Anyway.
Oh, jeez. So, yeah. With that, we come to the big moment.
Number 1, Jonin.
And given that Sven's already foreshadowed it with another parallel character, it is kind of obvious. Lucina from Fire Emblem Awakening.
Of course. Honestly, there are a lot of princesses in Fire Emblem with how long it's gone on and the pseudo-medieval setting, but really, well, I'll let Jonin explain it, but really, Lucina does it better than any of them.
Yeah, I mean, I know some people are rolling their eyes because I get it. Awakening does have a lot of problems, and I get that Nintendo is kind of overexposing it at the moment, but Lucina is a primary example of when Awakening gets it right really well, because to give a quick primer for those who don't know, Lucina's backstory is that she comes from a future that's being taken over by a combination of zombies and an apocalyptic dark dragon.
As you do in Fire Emblem.
Indeed, and just like Monica, she decides the only way to fix this is to go back to where she unintentionally kicks off part of the plot to Fire Emblem Awakening, and she starts actively trying to change things so that the world can be a lot better than the terrifying nightmare she lives in now. And admittedly, if you only follow the basic story, she does kind of come off as mixed exposition, but, well, she has to go through a lot. Like, she's already got the badass quota down in that she is incredibly good at fighting, inheriting the strengths of both Crom and whoever his wife ends up being, and staying resolute in the face of hard times and having to make some harsh decisions when trying to change a timeline that seems to be resolute in going back to the same mistakes over and over again. But where it gets better, the reason why I like her as a character so much is in the support conversations, because it makes perfectly clear that Lucina is just about holding together, because she's good at fighting, but not much else.
And that includes social situations.
Yeah, she's not very good at social situations. Her fashion sense is awful, and she also has great admiration for her father and is continuously putting herself down with this big inferiority complex, to the point where at first you think her pretending to be Marth, the main character for the first game, is just a disguise so she's not revealed. But then you find out a little bit later that she doesn't believe in her own ability to inspire the troops, so she ended up dressing like him in the vain hope that that will somehow inspire the rest of her people to fight.
Yeah, so not great socially, fashion sense is terrible, and not tremendously good self-confidence either.
Yeah, plus she's continuously having to ask her friends advice on how to rule and how to lead, etc. And basically, you slowly get the impression that Lucina is someone who is ludicrously out of her depth in more ways than one, and she wants to crack, but she knows she can't because she is literally the last line of defense.
Yeah, she is the only hope, basically, for a future that doesn't involve constant death. She is all that's standing between the current game setting and the zombie apocalypse.
Indeed, yes, and to top it all off, she knows that there's gonna be some harsh consequences for it, like there's already a possibility that she may have to kill one of her comrades if it turns out that her hunch is correct and they are the reason the apocalypse happens in the first place. But there's also the fact that there's the obligatory hot spring chapter, but one thing that actually makes it more than just a glorified fan service a bit is that you can have conversations in the middle of that battle that do reveal parts of the character, and there's one bit where Lucina mentions that, well, it kind of starts off goofy with Lucina trying to grab some Crom merchandise, and but it's then, as she says, she wants to grab it as much as she can because I'm gonna have to leave you guys eventually. And everyone's like, wait, what the hell? And she bluntly puts in, there is a baby version of me in this timeline. I can't exactly be around when my younger self is growing up and living as part of a family with you, so I'm gonna have to disappear eventually.
Yeah, and honestly, that's, again, we keep doing this, but that's very similar to what happens and then unhappens to Monica in Dark Cloud 2. That sort of realization that, especially when you already exist in the timeline, you can't exactly stay in the timeline. Which is unfortunate whenever you've come to know all these people as companions, even though they may in fact have been your forebears.
Yeah, it's that kind of bit I really do like, and I kind of wish it was explored a bit more, but otherwise, Lucina goes through enough already, and it's, I know it all sounds really simplistic, but it's executed really, really well, and it's kind of, again, tying back to some other princesses on this list, someone who's been through a lot of crap stays resolute throughout, even though, unlike many of the other princesses, she's really not that well equipped to do it. It's kind of that, plus the little quirks, like the fact that, again, her fashion sense is terrible, and her idea of bonding with her father is a sparring match, which...
Yeah, that the classic Fire Emblem way of bonding.
Yeah, and in fact, Crom points out, wait, hang on, were you deliberately holding back just so that we can keep sparring? No.
Also, another talent she does not have, not good at lying.
Yeah, also, one of my favorite quotes, I imitated one of my father's moves and punched a hole through the wall. Success?
Yeah, again, this is one of those entries where if she wasn't on Jonin's list, she'd be on mine.
Yeah, it's like a very simple execution, but it's done really well. It creates a character that is really likable, and it's not surprising that she's gotten as popular as she has. Also voiced by Laura Bailey. Always helps.
Yeah, That's pretty much universally true for all media.
And then you get into Project X Zone, where she murders with a lot of the other cast members beautifully in that sense, so...
Oh god, no kidding. I'm still amazed by the idea of a game where you can have Lucina and Segata Sanshiro in the same room.
I know, right? But yeah, getting back before we divert too far, that is why Lucina is my number one princess. Something I never thought I'd ever have to say, but yeah.
My number one princess. I'm pretty sure that's on a mug somewhere.
Sven, over to you to finish this off.
Okay, before we head into the final round, I suppose we ought to do this before both of us forget about it in turn. Honorable mentions for me.
Oh crap, that was a thing I forgot.
Yeah. Honorable mentions for me. The surprise entry for my favorite Disney princess, Moana, from the movie, well, take a guess. Luna from Oh God, My Little Pony. And technically, Cassandra Pentagast from Dragon Age Inquisition.
Good choices. For mine, well, there's a lot of candidates from Legend of Zelda, mainly Midna, Hilda, and, well, the versions of Princess Zelda from Phantom Hourglass and Breath of the Wild. And also, I will throw in the other two Tales of Princesses I mentioned, Estelice and Natalia.
Also good choices. Now, without further ado, my number one... the character who a lot of our viewers will probably be astounded actually beat Leia for the number one spot, and I sort of am too, given how this series started off. At the top spot, the Avatar herself, Korra, from Legend of... well, again, take a guess.
Okay, you're gonna have to explain a lot of the positives for me, Sven, because she kind of starts off initially as being... well, she has kind of an interesting arc of not having to face everything with brute force, since nearly all the superpowers and fights come easy to her, but she does at times come off as overly aggressive and stubborn, especially during the Book 2 Spirits, where she was picking fights with people for no reason.
Yeah, and believe it or not, even though I used to have a big issue with that as a character trait, now it's part of why I actually relate to Korra. See, her entire arc is basically centered around maturing. In the first 2 seasons, as literally everyone who has been graced to watch the first 2 seasons of Legend of Korra knows, Korra starts off as a gung-ho, fairly aggressive 18-year-old who really views her duties as the Avatar as a long series of punching things to make them stop doing bad things. But as all of us do, Korra, over the course of later seasons, specifically the latter half of Season 2 and onwards, matures from being an idiot teenager into being an actual mature Avatar. Some trauma may be involved. I'm looking at Yuza here and your fondness for poison, but as a general rule, I relate to that because I, too, at one point was an aggressive, fight-picking, dumb teenager. And, I mean, I like to think that I've improved in the time since. I leave that to the opinions of those around me. But I just sort of feel that character arc, and I think a lot of us do, because, honestly, as a general rule, being a teenager sorta sucks. And I think that's especially true for someone who is both the daughter of someone very important and also the fulcrum on which the entire balance of the world rests.
Yeah, I guess that is definitely true. I mean, I've only watched the first 2 seasons, so I have a feeling I've missed the best bits of her character, but it is kind of true that sometimes some of the most satisfying arcs are when some people start off as insufferable teenagers who are self-righteous and the like, but then do eventually grow into respectable people over time. For example, Luke from Tales of the Abyss is a good example of that.
And funnily enough, her character development is both entirely the opposite of Sasuke and actually the same as him, because he actually becomes sufferable as a 36-year-old. It just took him way friggin' longer.
Yeah, in fact, I'll actually say adult Sasuke is the coolest he's ever been, but I go on.
Yeah, Sasuke with his Kratos hair. But that's the big thing for me of how Korra develops over the series. to the point where comparing Korra at the start, where basically her solution to Amon and Unalaq is just punch them a lot, to Korra in Season 3 where she's just run thin through the ringer and just frustrated by politics and ultimately is forced into near madness by Zahir. Well done, asshole, by the way. To Korra in the last season, who fights Big Bad Kuvira for a length of time, and then, once all is said and done, the spirit canon is dealt with. In the spirit world, Korra just sits down in front of Kuvira like, well, you sure did f*** up, but I'm willing to give you a chance.
Okay, wow, that is something I don't think I would have expected from her up to this point, so...
Yeah, let's just say that after being punched a lot by the rest of the world, Korra sort of ends up realizing that maybe that's not the best way to deal with things. And at the end of the conflict actually talks down the final antagonist with firm reason and sympathy.
Wow.
Which honestly to me, I loved Aang in the original Avatar series, and he did have a lot of development, but nothing so dramatic and relatable, because Korra really is like comparing oneself at 24, like me, to oneself at 18. And like I said, I sympathize with that because from the ages of 15 to 18, I was a friggin' idiot.
In fairness, a lot of us were back then.
Yeah. And then, of course, there's the matter of representation, because Korra was another pioneer in that regard. I'm still amazed by the fact that Nickelodeon actually allowed the showrunners to make bisexual people exist.
Indeed, yes.
It's another relatable thing for, in this case, especially a group of people that most media likes to either make the butt of a joke or completely ignore. It's just as trailblazing, pioneering, and essentially important as everything Leia did well back in the day. It's breaking new ground. And combined with the fact that Korra in general to me is just a solid, relatable character, even though I really wish they would have written her teenage temper fits a bit better in the first 2 seasons. I just generally like as a concept. And for that, even in the face of all the competition, beloved characters like Monica and Alencia, and groundbreakers like Leia, I have to give Korra the #1 spot for being a relatable hero for everyone.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the best way to sum it up. It's like you said, the princess is often denied as a kind of terrible trope idea, but it does lead to some great characters. It's just a case of, well, taking the cliche seriously and either not using it as a lazy trope or not using it as a punchline.
Yeah, like I said, there's some dreck out there, but I like to think that for every Princess Peach, there's a Princess Lucina, or a Korra just waiting to provide a decent counterpoint. Which honestly was kind of the point of this list. There's a lot of great female characters out there, but when a princess is done right, and done sympathetically, and in contrast to the terrible tropes associated with that role in fiction, it's really something to celebrate. I'm climbing off my soapbox now and handing the show back over to Jonin.
Indeed, and it'll be soon be time for us to wrap up this podcast, but first, we have to go through one very short section, namely,
Quickfire Reviews!
This is the section where we review stuff we've read, watched, or played, but within the maximum time limit of 60 seconds. Not much this time, but I'm just gonna go over something very, very quickly.
Garou, Mark of Wolves, sometimes known as Fatal Fury Mark of Wolves. It is a standalone fighter by SNK, which has recently been released on the Nintendo Switch and on Steam. It's a fighter that I feel does need some more love. The story aspects I'm gonna get into in a video later down the line, but the characters all look kinda cool, the sprite work and animation is ridiculously gorgeous for its time, pixels be damned, and the controls are surprisingly really well done, like you can very fluidly move from one special move to the other, and the balance is all great in that. Plus it also has a character which I can only describe as karate version of Undertaker, which...
Yeah, pretty impressive.
I love him already.
So yeah, long story short, if you have some change and you like fighting games, buy it.
Take that as a good enough recommendation as any. Even though I suck at fighting games.
So do I, admittedly. But yeah.
Yeah, you prefer real-life fighting games at which you're actually good.
I'm not that good, to be honest. Even in real life fighting, I tend to be average at best. But anyway, we're getting seriously off the point now. But yeah, that concludes our podcast for this month. Once again, thank you to everyone who sent us the questions, and I hope you enjoyed our bizarre countdown through princesses.
And if you didn't, that's okay. I just have one thing to say to you. Well, excuse me, princess. I'm gonna go jump into the River Sin now. Goodbye.
No, come back. We still have to finish this show.
Okay, Jonin, just grab me by a cane, I'm back.
Yeah, I've got you. So, before Sven throws himself into a river, we better end this podcast properly. Until next month, I've been the Jonin Monkey.
And I've been Sven the Crusader. I have nothing to add after that terrible joke. Goodbye.
Monkey Broadcast, a monthly review and discussion show hosted by the Jonin Monkey and Sven the Crusader. If you feel you've been the subject of slander or that your copyright is misused, send an email to thejoninmonkey@yahoo.co.uk. For more news and media reviews, follow me on Twitter @thejoninmonkey and go to thejoninmonkey.podbean.com for previous podcasts and MP3 downloads. All music used belongs to the original owners. Until next month, have fun, kids!